Welcome to the EmpowerHer Wellness Podcast. I'm Morgan, and I'm thrilled to be your host and wellness coach as we navigate the path to a healthier, more confident you. As the owner of Get Fit With Me, I bring years of experience in personal training, nutrition, and coaching to each episode. Join me as we explore practical tips and strategies for fitness, nutrition, mindset, and more, all tailored for busy women just like you. Let's empower your wellness journey and achieve lasting transformation together. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to an episode of the EmpowerHer Wellness Podcast. I'm your host and coach, Morgan Ekovich. And remember, we have made May the month of stress, not creating stress, but reducing stress, maybe bringing light to situations in our life that cause some stress, whether we want to admit it or not. And I am really excited to have a special guest on here today. And we're talking about a topic we have never talked about before, but I think it's something really, really important. And it's something that we probably don't start thinking about soon enough. It's not until something happens or something around us happens that starts getting us to have these conversations. And we're going to talk about how to legally protect ourselves, whether that's a will, a trust, whether that's, heaven forbid, something happens to us. What should we be doing? When should we be setting something up? Oh, shoot, I need to update that thing and it's on that to-do list. And it's one of those where, like, I'm 30, I don't have kids, I'm not married. Should I even be thinking about this now? So I have a ton of questions. I also work with so many moms and busy professionals that until something happens with a family member and we're dealing with this other side of it, of like, oh, do I even need one of those? How do I go about setting it up? What questions to ask. So I have brought in an expert because this is not my area of expertise by any means. I've brought in Katrina Hofstetter. She is the founder and attorney of Cornerstone Legal. I was actually on her podcast just a few months ago, and it was super fun. She's a Lansing local, and I thought this would be a super fun conversation because she's a mom, she's a female business owner, and she has dealt with all of this and deals with so many clients. So welcome. How are you today?
Thank you. I'm good. It's the end of the week, so I'm happy and I'm excited to be here.
Yay. Well, thank you for being here. Before we dive into like the actual fun things to talk about, will you give a little bit of background of how you started, why you started your business, what even made you want to be an attorney, and kind of how you got into the work that you do?
Yeah, sure. It's interesting because I remember after making the decision to go to law school and getting all, started with all of that and getting enrolled, I actually had wanted to be a lawyer in like sixth, seventh grade. And then it just kind of, it went away. I wasn't interested anymore. But it was kind of just serendipity, honestly. After high school, I was helping my parents run a family business, and we had a regular that would come in who had my former job. So she was a paralegal, legal assistant, whatever we're going to call them. And she wanted to retire. She was looking for someone that she knew and could trust to kind of fill her shoes. And that got my foot in the door. And I went to start working for that attorney in 2006, grew into that role to the point where I realized that's what I wanted to do. And after about 11 years, I decided to go to law school. It was part-time, I'm working full-time. I'm a mom, so I had to go part-time, but got through law school, graduated during COVID, took the bar during COVID, started my business during COVID, but it all worked out fine. We're coming up on 5 years. And honestly, the reason for hanging my own shingle, starting my own business was, one, I really wanted to break a lot of the stereotypes about not just lawyers, but just legal services in general, because I think there's a lack of education, a lot of misinformation out there. So I really wanted to be able to break through that and really help the community. But I also felt very strongly about how I wanted my business model to look and how I wanted to work with people. And I couldn't do that if I was working for the man. So it was really important to start my own business and be able to control all of those things. So here we
That
are.
is awesome. I did not realize that you also started your business during COVID.
Yep.
Yeah, so we're both on the same track. That's so funny that we don't realize it until, honestly, I don't realize some of these things until I have people on as guests, because that's when you
Right.
learn the background. Usually we catch up like on the day to day and that sort of stuff. So that's really awesome.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so one of the many things is I work with a lot of moms, and I believe that I know men also carry these burdens, but I believe that women carry the mental load of thinking ahead for the families, for
Mhm.
even just like, okay, we have soccer practice next Thursday, we have one vehicle, like literally all of those
Yeah.
pieces.
Yeah.
So, what are some of the biggest legal stressors that you see people worrying about when they're either getting ready to have a family or they now have a family, whether their kids are grown adults or they're like new babies?
Yeah. I would say from a legal perspective, those concerns are definitely different if you've got minor children versus adult children, but there are some pretty distinct concerns that I see. So if there are minor children as part of the family, the biggest concern seems to be what happens to those children. Where are they going to go if I pass away? What is that process going to look like? And yeah, there's an emotional side of it too, but from the legal perspective, they're literally thinking the state's going to come in and swoop their children away. And that's just not what happens. So, guardianship for the minor children is a big one for those families with young kids. And then, honestly, for on the other end of the spectrum, for the adult children, it's more about the concern is more, I want things to be smooth. I want the process to go really well, and they're really focused on just creating a plan to make that happen. Yeah.
Okay. So if I'm going to kind of take this a few different ways. So we have the stressors. Now, the part in my mind is okay, so I know where the stressors are. How do we have that conversation? You said the word emotional. Like, none of us want to think about our death. We don't want to
No.
think what happens when we're not around. So it can be a very sensitive conversation. So, like, how do you navigate that with clients, or how do you prompt that when you're out and about and somebody just randomly asks you, of, I have a baby on the way, what the hell do I do? How do you add a little bit of gentleness to a very hard topic?
Yeah. I think being a mom helps because I'm kind of in the same position, and I've had to think about those things myself and navigate talking to my husband and us making those decisions. So there's definitely a lot of empathy that goes into it, and I can relate to what they're going through. But I tend to focus on things like, it's hard to talk about medical power of attorney. It's hard to talk about advanced medical directives and life support, but we need to, because if we don't, somebody's going to have to figure that out later. And that puts a huge burden on that person or the whole family. And so I try to focus the discussion around, yeah, we've got to make these decisions. They're hard. Adulting is not easy. But if we do it now, and if we do it, if we talk about it in a gentle and loving way and understand that someone may even be going through a health issue in the moment and it's more real for them, if we just focus on this is erasing burden for the family later, that seems to help a lot. Yeah.
Okay. So now we're going to go into a few different areas. So I've got the background, how we do it, and I think I have like three things that come to mind. One is will, what a will is, when do we need it? A
Yeah.
trust. I hear people saying everything should be in a trust, and I'm like, cool. Awesome. I I don't have anywhere. And then the third piece is I've just heard this more recently on why people typically get married even after second and third marriages, not necessarily because they feel the need to be married, but for some of those medical decisions. So those are kind of three buckets that I'd like to touch on a little bit. Do you have a preference which one you want to start with?
I actually think maybe starting with the third one that you mentioned, married
Okay.
versus unmarried, because I think there is a little bit of misinformation about that.
Okay.
And I don't know if you have a specific question, but there's kind of two directions that I feel like I would go in talking about that topic. Do you have a question specifically, or you want me to just run with it?
I kind of have a question
Okay.
because so my boyfriend and I have been together 9.5 years. We are not married. We're eventually going to get married, but right now we're not. So if
Mhm.
something happens to us, technically it's our parents that make decisions, but we're the ones who've had the conversations,
Right.
correct? Like, I think that's a big thing right
Yeah.
now. That's the first question that kind of comes to mind, and that of like, what's the right thing to do? How do we navigate that?
Yeah. So I think that is a common understanding that people have is if I don't have planning in place and I'm not married, my partner is going to just be shut out of things. And that's not really what happens. So, from the perspective of something like a medical power of attorney, if you get in an accident, you have a health issue, and you're in the hospital, in most instances, they're going to want either a healthcare power of attorney or they're going to want probate guardianship. So probate guardianship is just, it's the default. If you don't have a healthcare power of attorney, you're probably going to have to go get that set up. I have heard of really random situations where people are just able to make decisions for their loved one. I don't understand how it happens or why. I don't know if it's like that specific facility is a little bit more lax. I don't have an explanation for that. But in most instances, it's either healthcare power of attorney or guardianship. If if you're in a situation where you don't have the power of attorney and you have to have guardianship established, we'll take your situation for example. Yeah, your parents would have priority to be appointed, but your partner, your boyfriend, he could still seek appointment. He could go to the probate court and
Mm.
say, I want to be appointed. Your parents have to be notified. They have to be given the opportunity. They could let him. So it's always possible. But at the
Oh.
same time, you could name him in a power of attorney as your first person, even though you're not married. So you don't have to be married or related in any way to the people that you want to name in those documents.
Hmm.
So I'm a big advocate of if you can put the documents in place, it's better than having to go through a probate process at the last minute. So,
Okay. So when you go about doing that, is that something people come to you for? Is it something we find online and we just sign a paper? How do you go about doing that? Because that's kind of a
yeah,
follow-up that's going to fall into all of these categories.
absolutely. I will just be very candid and I will address the like using an attorney versus an online option. And I think it boils down to what you're comfortable with. And I've had people call before and say, well, I have an old will from LegalZoom, or, I got this power of attorney off a website or something like that. Can it work? Probably. Is it definitely in compliance with the state laws and is it up to date? I don't know. If we want to do something as important as plan for when I get hit by a bus or when I die or, my minor children, even if I wasn't an attorney, I don't think I would trust a random online website to produce a document like that. It's absolutely going to be a lot cheaper because
Mhm.
when you go to an attorney, you're not just paying them to draft a document that is up to date and in compliance with the law. You're paying for advice and guidance and all of those things that come with it. So I am always going to advocate for getting proper legal advice from an attorney in your state versus LegalZoom and whatever else is out there. So in general, yeah, if you want to have powers of attorney to stay out of probate, then I would suggest that you work with an attorney. Yeah.
Okay, so that's good to know. I didn't know that. Like, see, these are things that you hear and you see. And I think with social media, we see all of the things, and
Yeah.
there is always a scare tactic out there that in my mind, I'm like, I haven't had these conversations with my
Mm-hmm.
parents. You have these conversations with the people that you typically live with. But if
Yeah.
you're not in a situation, okay, so there's that portion. Um, Marriage in general, you
Mhm.
get married, no matter genders, any of that. I assume marriage looks all the same on that legal side these days.
Yeah.
Anything they should be doing legally to protect themselves, protect a business maybe they had beforehand,
Yeah.
things that, and it's not to create fear, but just to know that things are set up correctly and instead of, oh shoot, I forgot about that. And
Mhm.
now we either owe a bunch of money or something else has happened.
Yeah, so there are a couple things that come to mind. I think when we transition and talk about trust, I might talk a little bit more about, protecting assets because that's a core thing that trusts do. But one of the things that comes to mind for married versus unmarried couples is if there's not planning in place at all. So if there's no will, there's no trust, the assets are going to pass, we're talking about just the asset side of things. The assets are going to pass based on the law. So if you and your boyfriend have a joint account together, then it's not a big deal that you're not married, because if you pass, it's going to go to him. He's joint on your account. You can name him as a beneficiary on assets. So not being married doesn't prevent you from doing those things. But if you don't have joint owners, if you don't have a beneficiary on an account, and you don't have trust planning to protect your assets, if you pass away, that boyfriend has zero ability to get anything of yours. He's not going to be an heir or an interested party. He's not going to be involved at all if your assets go through probate. Whereas if you're married, then spouse gets priority for everything.
Got it. Okay. And you keep saying probate.
Yep.
What does that mean? Because I have an idea, but what does that mean for those of us listening who are like, yep, heard that term, no idea what it means?
It's one of the many courts that is in the lower court system in the state. And the probate court specifically handles things like guardianships for minor children, guardianships for adult people who don't have a medical power of attorney. They handle conservatorship. So that is, there's the Britney Spears is a great example that people seem to
Oh, yeah.
think of when we say conservatorship. So if guardianship is a lack of a healthcare power of attorney, conservatorship is a lack of a financial power of attorney. And so either one of those could come up. So you can have probate exposure. You might have to go to probate even during your lifetime. But when I hear people talking about probate and they're like, I don't want to go to probate, they're usually talking about probate after you pass away. And that is something that you may have to, a process that you may have to go through if you don't plan for your assets and protect them. And then the estate through probate is really the administration of all of your stuff.
Okay. So I feel like this moves us into trust is probably a next good spot to move through this. So what is a trust? Who needs one? Why would somebody need one?
I kind of typically talk about trusts and wills together. And once I go through this, it probably will make sense. Trusts and wills are very similar.
Okay.
They are both legal documents. They contain all of the same types of information. They're both going to talk about you and your family. They're both going to put somebody in charge of something. So we call that a fiduciary. And fiduciary is just like this catch-all term for anybody that's in charge of someone else's money. And then both documents have beneficiaries. So those are the similarities. And that's kind of where it ends. Wills are unique because that's where we name guardians for our minor children. And so wills are important when you have minor children. And in my opinion, that's where they stop being important. Um,
Okay.
another big difference between wills and trusts is a will, even though it has all of the same information as a trust, a will has zero power outside of that probate process. And so if you
Mm.
had a will, you put somebody in charge in that will, let's say you have your boyfriend is named as the person in charge, and then you pass away, he's not going to walk around with that will and accomplish anything. He can't take it to the bank. He can't take it to the life insurance company. Nothing. The will doesn't work like that. You have to first take the will, you go through a probate process. The probate court gives it their blessing and makes sure that it is, it lines up with the law. And then they actually issue a separate document. That's the power document. If we look at trusts, that's not required. So going to probate and getting a blessing is not required for a trust to be administered and used. The trust itself has power all on its own. And your boyfriend could take that trust to the bank and get control. But the key thing that we haven't talked about yet is your assets. And so in order for the trust to accomplish what it needs to accomplish, your assets have to be part of that trust. And that's a whole funding process. We can get into that maybe in another part of the conversation. But putting your assets in the trust or sending them to your trust after you pass away is really what allows for your assets to stay out of that probate estate process. And obviously, you said, well, who needs them? Who needs a will or who needs a trust? Obviously, if wills are where we name guardians, then if you have minor children, you need to have a will. My personal opinion on trusts, and this is going to differ from attorney to attorney, I will look at each client individually. And if they're married, they probably need a trust, but maybe not. There could be other reasons why they could get away with something else. If there's minor children, we definitely want a trust. I don't think I've done a will only based plan for someone with minor children. The reason being, you can't really name your kids on on beneficiary designations. They can't inherit money if they're not adults. And what happens is if you don't have a trust and if you name your kids directly, or if everything goes through probate and your kids are the beneficiaries, what ends up happening is they get their own conservatorship. So that same one that you could be exposed to, they're stuck with it for the rest of their minor life until they're 18. And we can avoid that if we just run everything through a trust. So those are kind of the key factors I look for. So married couple, minor children, and then business owners is another big one. If you've got a business,
Okay.
you probably don't want to rely on something other than a trust. Yeah.
Okay. And when should people start thinking about this? Because like I mentioned in the beginning, I think we don't realize that we probably need one of these, or we're like, it's been on the to-do list, but somehow it's at the bottom because it seems really hard and complicated. In my mind, it seems like one of those huge tasks. It doesn't seem like calling the doctor and setting an appointment.
Mhm.
So, when should we be thinking about this? When is a good time to reach out to an attorney and even start asking some questions to them? When is a good time to start doing this in life? And I know everybody's different in situations, but when do you typically recommend to at least start a conversation about it?
I don't think that it's necessarily too early to do it as soon as you're an adult. I don't know that I would recommend going full bore with a trust plan as soon as you turn 18. I definitely recommend that parents who have adult children, so these kids going off to college, they're 18, I think it's a great idea for them to have just powers of attorney in place because some of those kids are still very reliant on their parents for like, what's my social security number? And like, you see videos all the time on
What's your
Instagram.
birthday? Because I'm still on your insurance.
Right. What's wrong with me? Oh, I have a rash. Like they don't even know. They don't know what they're
Right.
supposed to say. So having powers of attorney, medical and financial help for those kids going off to college. Beyond that, I think that kind of the crucial point is if you're going to get married, I would wait until you're married because otherwise then we're dealing with a name change and that gets a little bit messy. If you're never going to get married, if you're going to live the single life forever, then there's no real cutoff point, like, oh, this is when I should do it. But I know a lot of people who they want to wait until they're older, they want to wait until their kids are older or they're done having kids or something like that. And you don't have to do that. So the way that a trust can be created for families allows for so much creativity, so much flexibility in how those documents are drafted that I could write a trust for someone who doesn't have kids yet that plans for all future children. You don't have to have already had all the kids to plan for them. And so I would say if you're married, whether you're going to start a family or not, that's when you should start thinking about it because the overall plan can be built in a way to adjust to your life for 15, 20 years.
Okay, that's really cool. I guess I didn't realize that you could make them, that they could be so creative.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm assuming most of us don't know that
Yeah.
unless we've kind of gone down that process. And depending on who you work with, like you've mentioned, there's different opinions based on different attorneys
Yeah.
that with your background as being a mom and a business owner, you also have a very different perspective
Mm-hmm.
than some other attorneys do. So I think that's another important piece is I think it's just like our doctor and our dentist and all these people. Like, if you go once and it doesn't feel right, you don't have to go back.
Yep.
Like, try people out, have multiple conversations, consultations before you, because you want to be with the right person. You want to find the right fit for this.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. Other than a will and a trust, are there any other essential legal documents that most adults should have in place or that we should have stored somewhere for situations like, are there any essential other legal documents that we should be thinking about?
Yeah, and I've kind of touched on them already, but you've got the financial power of attorney. So if anybody doesn't understand what that is, it's just a legal document that says you appoint an agent to do anything for you that you can't do for yourself, but within that like financial realm. So write checks, pay your bills, do your online banking, file your taxes, and deal with your insurance, anything that kind of has to do with your income and expenses and assets. So they step in if you can't. And then the other one, the flip side of that is the healthcare power of attorney. Most people understand what that means, but same idea. You're putting someone in charge to make your medical decisions when you can't. So those are kind of the other two core documents. And then not every estate planning attorney, at least in this area, is including a funeral power of attorney. But Michigan did pass a law in 2016 that provided for that document to be part of a plan. And I feel like it's going to start becoming expected at funeral homes and cremation companies. So I include it standard in all of our plans, but it's the same idea as the other two powers of attorney. So you're putting someone in charge to make the decisions about, are you going to be buried or cremated, or, like, what is that going to look like? So those three for my clients, those are the other standard ones.
Okay, and we can do those at any point. Is there like if you do a will and trust, do the other three kind of just fall into it? Okay.
Yeah.
So the other three are like pre-will and trust.
Mhm.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. I have, and you can look at the website and see this. I'm very transparent with my plans and my pricing, but I have a progression. So I have a simple power of attorney plan. That's what like college students will do, or, young people who don't really have assets yet, don't have kids. And then I have a simple plan where you add in the funeral document. And then there's will-based plans and trust-based plans. So they build on each other.
That's awesome. I love that you have that because I think that's one of the, and I love that you're transparent about it because that's the other thing is
Yeah.
when we think lawyers and attorneys, we think something that will probably bankrupt us,
Yeah.
depending, yeah, but all important, necessary things, but also something else we hold off on or we choose the legal Zoom or heaven forbid you're having AI created and run it as like a full-blown thing.
Yeah.
Probably not the best option. Always maybe a good spot to get started, but always go see a real professional
Yeah.
after. Okay, so people are feeling overwhelmed. We now understand the basis of all of it. If people are feeling overwhelmed, what is just the first step that they should be taking? Because part of this podcast is not just educating, but also giving them the steps of, great, I just learned all this information. What can I do with it? So let's talk about how we can actually implement this, what they can do after listening to this podcast. So, what's a good first step that they should take?
I mean, I'm a little biased. I would say go to my website, and there's a ton of information out there. And, you could Google it, but I don't Google what I want for my medical information. I'm going to talk to my doctor. And so, short of having a consultation and actually coming to see me, there are a ton of resources and educational information on my website, including my blog, where every topic you can possibly imagine has probably been covered from based on what we've been talking about today. I think that going to a trusted source, which I hope I'm considered a trusted source in the community,
Yes.
I think going there and utilizing that information to just round out that understanding of everything is a great first step. And then having a consultation, I think, is really important because estate planning is a very personalized process. So not only is it personal to you because we're talking about all these scary adult things, but it's personalized in the sense that, like I said earlier, we can get real creative with how the plan is put together. I've kind of gotten into the habit of telling clients, if you want to do something and you think you can't, you probably can't. Like if you're
Mm.
wondering, I wonder if Katrina will let us do this. Yep, probably. Because there's not a lot of limitations when we're building trusts and getting really creative with our kids and our beneficiaries. So I think having the consultation to whittle away at all of these misunderstandings, whether it is, can I do this? Can I not do this? Is it actually scary? Is it going to bankrupt me? I think the consultation helps with that a lot. And often I'll have clients, we'll get all done and they'll be like, wait, was that it? Yep, that was it. So, yeah, getting a trusted source, reviewing things, learning more, educating yourself, and then having a consultation.
Awesome. And then another thing that came to mind as you're talking is I'm like, what do I need to bring to you? Like when I come, what should I either physically have or should I know? Because that's the other thing is I know when I go to my tax person, I know exactly what they need
Yep.
and and if it looks this way, like, and I know that. But when I come to you, do I need to bring my real social security card? Do I need all of my bank information? Like,
Right.
what sorts of things are needed first initially, like for a consultation, but then also if we move forward with the will and the trust, what other things, documents do I need to find? What things do I need from other people that I may be putting on those documents?
Yeah. So we start with an intake form with all of our prospective clients. Most attorneys do. And the intake form is tailored to gather information that we need specifically for estate planning. That is typically going to be, all of the personal information about you and then your partner, spouse, children. So names, addresses, phone numbers, dates of birth. And then it also asks for asset information because when it comes to the trust planning and us working with you to put your assets in your trust, we have to know what those assets are. And it's the basics though. Does it ask for an account number? Sure. Do we need it? Maybe not. I don't want clients to stress about account numbers and values. It's really more important to know the types of assets. So really, looking into your statements and all of your different accounts and life insurance policies ahead of time is helpful because then you're able to articulate, what do I have? And
Mm.
then one of the other things that we include in our intake form is some prompts to get the people thinking about who are the other people that we want to maybe include as our trustee or guardian or power of attorney. And then, what's their name? What's their address? What's their phone number? So it's really basic stuff like that. And then after the initial consultation, if any of that information is missing, then we're obviously going to gather that. But then the other common things that we might need at some point would be copies of deeds for property that you
Mm.
own. And then if you own a business, we're going to want to review the business records just to make sure that they're going to be in line with anything else that we might be doing.
Okay, so not anything super complicated, things we should have. And I like that the way that you guys do it, at least, is it's a form. And then I like the prompts at the end to get us thinking about some of those things. Because that's the worst is when you show up somewhere and people just start asking you questions. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't know. I have life insurance. I don't know. I have a Roth. Like, we have things, but like, you want me to, whereas knowing ahead of time some of the questions gives us time to research, take down information so we all feel more prepared. You feel more prepared. I feel more prepared. And then we get to where we're going more
Yeah.
effectively.
Yeah. Yeah. It's real important to either have that completed ahead of time or for some clients. I mean, if I'm working with older clients who it's just hard for them to pull all that information together, if I go to their house and meet with them there, I'll help them pull all of that together. We'll figure that out. But for the most part, people are able to put all that stuff together into an intake form ahead of time.
And then another question that came up. So you mentioned you can make a trust pretty much customizable to grow
Yep.
with you and your family. And I thought you mentioned for like 15 to 20 years, should you have it reevaluated at a certain point? Or once it's done and you're kind of golden? Is there a good common rule of like, if it's been over 15 years, you might want to just have it relooked at, sort of thing?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Definitely not. We don't want to let it sit on the shelf for 15 years, at least not in my opinion. For all the estate planning clients that we work with, we don't just work with them and then say, see you later. Like we stay with our clients. And one of the things that we do is we send a letter every 3 years. That's
Oh,
kind of my sweet spot as far as when I want clients to review their plan. And it doesn't mean that something has to be changed. It doesn't mean that they have to sit down with me or that anything's going to cost them money. But we send them a letter that is, I don't know, 2 or 3 pages, and it walks through, I want you to pull out your plan. I want you to review these documents. And then I want you to be thinking about, like, did any of these things happen in your life? And then if they've reviewed the documents and if they want to change something, or if a major life event has happened and we know we need to change, then it's like, okay, let's come in and meet in person. Let's talk about it and see whether or not we can make minor adjustments or if we have to redo anything.
I love this. But then it brings me to my next question. You send me a letter, and 3 years later, where the hell is my will and trust? So, where should we be storing it? Who should know that we have it and where to find it? Like, because I remember when my mom did hers a while ago, she was like, this is where it's at. This is like, she talked through it with me and my sister, which is important. But not everybody's going to do that. Some people are going to go do it. And also, when your kids are aging out, it's probably not top of mind. So, where should we store it? Should you have multiple copies? Should your family members know who you've worked with? Because I'm assuming you always have a copy. Not that you want to be bombarded by people, but that's probably one of my last questions. I could keep asking you questions, but I also know I want people to be able to come to you because it's so specific. And these
Yeah.
are more just general getting us confident in the conversation itself.
Yeah. There's a lot to share about that question. It won't take too long, but
Oh no,
one thing
take
I
your
want
time.
one thing I want to point out is, and I actually get asked about this all the time, and it kind of confuses people. So when you put together estate planning documents, those documents are private to you. Like they don't get recorded anywhere, they don't get registered, they're not out in the public at the court or the state. Do they get used in public? Yeah. You might have to take your financial power of attorney to the bank. You might have to take your medical power of attorney to your doctor or the hospital, but they don't get registered somewhere. So the originals are in a binder. We give every client this 2-inch thick binder that has all of their documents in it, all of the originals. We keep originals as well. So everything that gets signed, every document we sign in a kit. And that's because surprisingly enough, people lose these binders. I don't know how, but they
Mhm.
do. And then there's also, somebody has a house fire or they move and it gets misplaced in the move, something like that. So when that happens, then we can recreate everything with our originals. But then we also give all of our clients access to a client portal where they have PDFs of everything. And I feel like more clients that we're working with, as we get younger generations that we're working with, they like the digital aspect of that. So they will then, download it to their Google Drive or their OneDrive or something, and then they have an electronic version of everything. So then maybe the original binder ends up in a safe somewhere because they don't need to access those originals right away. They've got a digital
Mm.
copy. Definitely, we want to be telling our people that we've done it. Sometimes even asking permission ahead of time. Can I name you? Are you willing to do this? And then making sure they know either where the physical originals are or how to contact me or where to find it in the cloud if they've saved it somewhere. And then I think you also asked about, do I want people calling me? We do a lot of trust administration as well. So we put in all of our binders instructions and guidelines and all of our contact information because a lot of families will come back to us when their loved one passes away to handle the legal side of that administration, just to make sure that, they understand everything and they're doing it correctly. So we absolutely love it when people come back to us, even though it's sad because obviously somebody passed away. But yeah, we're here for that. And yeah, the clients get multiple versions of it and they should definitely share it with the family.
Okay, that's good to know. I like the digital copy because you're right. You can store it wherever. It's a little bit more searchable than going through a big safe or whatever. Sometimes you get
Yeah.
a lot of papers up in there, but knowing that a hard copy is important and we can always come back to you for another hard copy. And I
Yes.
did not know they didn't go to the public. I assumed like it went to public record for some reason. That's just an assumption that I had made.
Yeah.
Um,
Most people think that. And I think the reason it confuses people is they're like, well, how does anybody know we did this? Well, I mean, you should tell people, you should tell your family. But then also, depending on the type of planning you do, if you do trust planning, your assets are connected to that trust. And so it's not like your family can just go do whatever they want with it because the trust isn't publicized. The assets are stuck there. They're part of that trust. They can't just I think the biggest concern is, well, if it's not public, how do we know the family's going to honor it? Well, they kind of have to because your assets are structured that way. So,
got it. Oh my gosh, so many questions. And it just gets the wheels rolling of how many things, how many assets we probably have that we don't realize are assets.
yeah.
And yeah, business, property, retirement funds, life insurance, like those are four main ones that come to mind. Car, I don't know if that falls into that.
Yep.
Okay.
Life insurance, group life insurance at work often gets forgotten about because you're not really paying for it. It's an asset. Checking, savings, investments, HSAs, there's so much out there.
Oh my goodness. So awesome. Like this is just it's not something that's been weighing on me, but it is something that I've been like being a business owner, should I be doing something? So selfishly enough, today's episode was a little bit for me to get some of these questions answered, but I also know that this is something that as women, it weighs on us
Yeah.
and we tend to take the burden of this when something does happen. So before we like wrap up, do you have any other advice or tips or anything you want to share with the listeners?
I could talk for hours with advice and tips and information. I would say, I have a really heavy presence on social media, the YouTube channel. There's so much out there where you can just essentially get free information about all of the estate planning, business planning, real estate planning. So there's a ton of advice and tips out there. I guess I would just say in general, like it's really never too early. Don't wait for that big milestone to happen. So like
Mm.
I think it's common people will say, we're not going to have kids until we're financially stable. That's a really common thing I hear from people. Like, yeah, I really want to make sure that things are in place before we have kids. You're never going to be ready. You're never financially ready for kids. So it's kind of like that. You don't need to get over some hump before you do planning like this. It's just too important. So, my biggest advice is take it seriously. It's a huge investment for your family, it's not a huge financial investment. And I like what you said earlier, like get to know the person you're going to work with because it is going to get real personal and you want to make sure that you're comfortable with that person and their process and you're going to trust them and listen to them. So do your research ahead of time. Yeah.
Awesome. I love that. And you mentioned a YouTube channel. Do you have any of your socials, like your Facebook page? Is there any of your socials you want to promote, or do you have a program or anything you want to promote here at the end for people to go check out other than just your packages in general?
Yeah, not specifically off the top of my head. I mean, I have the YouTube channel has both my podcast, which is not legal related, as well as a ton of legal videos. Because every month when we do a blog, there's a video about it. So
Cool.
if you're more of an auditory processor and you want to learn about those legal things, go to the YouTube channel because then you'll get to listen about it instead of reading the blog. And then a lot of the information on the website carries over to the social media. So I would say maybe start on the YouTube channel and look for the educational information there. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being a guest and sharing your wealth of knowledge. I know you have so much more that we have barely like hit, like the iceberg, we've just have barely tipped it. So, thank you all for joining in. Remember, we are working on reducing our stress. So, ways to do that. One, if this is something that's been weighing on your mind, check out her website, check out her YouTube, ask a question, book a consultation. But also, if it's just stress in general, get outside,
Mhm.
take a walk, take a breath, put your phone away, all of those things, little things like 3 to 5 minutes throughout our day will help reduce those stress levels. May is Mother's Day. So if you are a mother, you've probably already celebrated it, but like us as women are important and our stress matters. It affects all areas of our life. So thank you all for joining us for the Empower Her Wellness podcast today. I'll see you all next Thursday. Thank you for tuning in to the Empower Her Wellness podcast. I hope you found today's episode inspiring and packed with actionable tips. Remember, your journey to becoming the strongest, most confident version of yourself is just beginning. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode and join our community of empowered women. Until next time, stay strong and stay confident.